Good afternoon, World Happiness Summit. It's great to be here today. And you know what? I feel more comfortable with my shoes off. That's easier. Good. So, I want to start with why is it that I'm here? Happiness in action. Right? Happiness in action is such a beautiful concept. I love it. And yet, I want to ask a question. I want to ask, in this beautiful title of Happiness in Action, what is happiness? And I'm not trying to be philosophical here. I'm asking a very practical question. What is happiness? I've been studying this for years. I'm the director of the MAP program. You might have heard of the Masters in Applied Positive Psychology, UEL in London. And I'm also a professor for mindfulness-based counseling at Naropa University in Boulder, Colorado. And in my research and in my work, I bring together mindfulness and happiness and meaning in life and flow and so many wonderful concepts that I find truly deeply inspiring. And I do that because I believe that, you know how frequently we think that we're really afraid of death? Well, here's what I think. I think we're not really afraid of death as much as reaching that moment in which we breathe our final breath. And we're all going to get there, whether it'll be tomorrow or in 100 years, we'll get there. And when we get to that moment, what we're afraid of is to look back and think, uh-oh, I haven't really lived. And at that point, that'll be too late. And I feel that this is an incredibly powerful motivator to live the kind of life with which I could reach that final moment and let go. Let go with peace. And for me, positive psychology is this incredible playground where I can play with those concepts, play with those questions. And perhaps the most important question as part of that exploration, as part of that journey is, how do I experience happiness? And as importantly, how do I experience an authentic happiness? Because, you see, interesting, right? We have all those really well-intended journalists and scholars and researchers and authors, and they tell us, you need to be happy, we need to be happy. And you know what the result is? The result is that a lot of people feel under pressure, explicitly or implicitly under pressure to be happy. And we create the kind of experience around happiness that is, to me, an illusion, one we cannot really achieve. Karen, in her beautiful sharing, talked about those moments where something did happen and she felt great, and if something didn't happen according to what she wanted, then she didn't really feel good. So I want to ask ourselves, what is it that we define as happiness? I asked those questions within positive psychology. You might know positive psychology. It started around 1998. And when it started, I referred to this as the first wave of positive psychology. And back then, just for you to know, this is very interesting. Back then, I'm talking about 1998, we had 46,000 journal papers on depression and 400 journal papers on happiness. That's the proportion within scientific world and scientific research when it comes to mainstream and positive psychology work. We knew very little about happiness. So we started with a very simplistic approach to it. Back then, the idea was positive emotions, feeling good, being happy, that's good. That's what we want. Negative emotions, not feeling happy, that's bad. That's what we try to get rid of. And the message back then was that as long as we focus on the positive, we will eliminate the negative. The negative emotions, they were like something that we need to eradicate, something we need to kick out of our lives so that we could be happy, so that we could be positive. As I said, this is simplistic. More than that, I would say it's unhelpful. And that led us to the creation of what we refer to as second wave positive psychology. As part of which we talk about embracing the dark side of life. So, let me share with you a very short quote from the beginning of our book, where we say, the dark side refers to challenging experiences, thoughts, emotions, and behaviors which trigger discomfort in us. We all know those moments. You know, you go through life and something happens. Someone says something to you, something happens around you, certain people, certain situations, and you feel that discomfort. Can you recognize it in your body, in your stomach, in your chest? Something is bubbling, and it doesn't feel really good. Such discomfort frequently avoided as it carries an engagement with fear, pain, distress, or confusion. What do we do when we meet that discomfort? We try to run away because we know what's coming. Right? It will trigger certain emotions we don't really like. Pain and confusion and anger and dissatisfaction. Those are emotions we would have liked to escape, to avoid. However, engaging with the challenge and discomfort has a great potential for growth, healing, insight, and transformation. If you take a single sentence from my whole talk today, let it be this one sentence. Right? Yeah, when we allow ourselves to engage with that challenge, with that discomfort, there's so much potential for healing there. In other words, the dark side contains the seed for a potential positive outcome, even when the path towards this outcome is testing. We have all been there. We've all experienced it. Those tests, those difficult, challenging moments and experiences in life. As part of second wave positive psychology, we investigate many different branches of positive psychology where this could be applied. So, for example, I can tell you that we work around the concept of meaning and purpose. And I've heard a number of speakers here talk about meaning and purpose. Meaning and purpose incorporate a lot of challenges. If your life incorporates that seeking of meaning and purpose, then you know how confusing it could be, how challenging, how much courage you need to find within yourself in order to ensure that your life and your choices are aligned with that deep, deep felt meaning and purpose. That is challenging. And then we have the topic of strengths, where my very good friend Brian Nemick is researching. And for example, a current topic they study at the moment is overusage and underusage of strengths, which is fascinating. This is challenging. How can we work with that challenge in order to grow, in order to express more of our strengths? Sadness and suffering, which could be a platform for positive transformation. Piers Worth is doing wonderful work around developmental positive psychology, showing how each stage in life incorporates different challenges. And again, this is something you've probably experienced. You know what I'm talking about. In your 20s, you were facing certain things, and in your 30s, in your 40s, 50s, 60s, each stage in life embodies certain difficulties we need to face. When we face those difficulties, when we are able to process them and work with them and let go of them, then we move into the next stage free. When we don't, it's a heavy backpack we carry from stage to stage. That's the kind of work we invite people to do as part of second wave positive psychology. Work with those challenges to grow and transform. Kate Heffron is doing wonderful work around resilience and mortality and death. Again, usually death is something we think about as anxiety-provoking, as something that holds us back. But we have research showing that if we change our attitude towards death, it could propel us into living life more fully. Instead of something that scares us and holds us back, it could be something that pushes us deeply into life, into deeper engagement, into living it more fully. I do a lot of work around spirituality and mindfulness, work around self-awareness that the spiritual journey is offering us. When I was very young, I think I was 8 or 9, I read The Never-Ending Story for the first time. Have you read the book or seen the film, right? Never-Ending Story with this child, his name is Atreo. And in the book, Atreo is being told that he needs to complete 3 tasks. And he completes the first one, he completes the second one, and then he's going to face the third task, the third mission. And I remember as a child, I was thinking, what's going to happen now, right? Is he going to fight dragons? What war is going to kind of happen now in the book? And instead, he's being told that he needs to walk in the desert, face a huge mirror, and see himself in that mirror. As a child, I was deeply disappointed. Like, seriously? Where's the fight? Where's the action? Now, as an adult, I know it's ingenious. It's ingenious because there is no greater challenge in our own lives than standing in front of something that reflects ourselves. Without the layers, without the games, without the bullshit, just seeing ourselves as we are. It's difficult and it's painful and it's the most rewarding process we can choose. Another example of the kind of work we're doing as part of second wave positive psychology. Professor Stephen Joseph and many, many other researchers are focusing on what we call PTG, post-traumatic growth. We've just heard about the idea of 2 groups. One would crumble following a trauma, would find it very difficult to get up again, and the other one would flourish. They would actually grow following the trauma. They would have more social resources, more spiritual resources, more internal awareness as a result of the trauma. They would grow. That's post-traumatic growth, obviously a central part of what we're talking about. I don't have the time to go into each of those in depth, so I've chosen to talk today about negative emotions and happiness. Negative emotions and happiness. And I'm a researcher and a teacher, and I run workshops and so on and so forth, but I'm also a therapist. And in a therapy room, when I sit with clients, there's this really powerful moment when they would share their pain. And they would share their challenge. And they might be crying, and it might be very difficult, and something very meaningful would be taking place. And then they would pause. They would look at me, and they would say something like, wait a second, but I need to be happy. Or just wait, but I want to be happy. Or my favorite, but I'm supposed to be happy. This is really interesting. You'll have a moment of deep vulnerability and great authenticity, which is met by the cognitive processes within our own minds, telling us how are we supposed to feel. In this case, I'm supposed to feel good. This isn't right. Something isn't right here. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't think we should be pushed in any way into our challenges or into our pain. It has to be done with a lot of gentleness and a lot of compassion. And yet that is the healthy way of doing this kind of work. In Buddhism, there's this fascinating concept of the 2 arrows. The first arrow is the arrow of pain. So something's going on and I feel the pain or the anger or the jealousy, which is then accompanied by the second arrow, as part of which I reject the first arrow. Because I feel uncomfortable with that negative emotion, I try to push it away, which makes the first arrow naturally more painful, more difficult to work with and digest. The most interesting data around this comes from pain research. Pain is divided into what we call primary pain and secondary pain. So imagine that I wake up in the middle of the night, it's completely dark, I stumble out of bed, I make my way to the kitchen, and I stub my toe at the edge of the bed, right? I can see some of you smiling. You know what I'm talking about? A wave of pain is shooting from my toes into my brain, signaling pain, pain, pain. This is primary pain. This is an unavoidable part of life. Pain is an unavoidable part of life. Nothing we can do about it. We're human. It's there. However, that's not where the story ends, right? What will happen then? The pain is shooting into my brain. I get those experiences of physiological pain, and then what? What would I do then? Yeah, I will curse. Right? Like, no! And I have those thoughts, right? Why is my bed positioned at that angle? Why? And why didn't I leave a glass of water next to my bed? Or even better, why didn't my wife leave a glass of water next to my bed? That's, blaming others is such a great thing under those circumstances. And why is it so dark and blah, blah, blah. And as a result of those thoughts and those emotional responses, my body would tense and I would get what we call secondary pain. Now, you want to hear something amazing? And it blew my mind when I just read this years ago. I was thinking, that's unbelievable. Secondary pain is as painful or more painful than primary pain. Let me say it again, so just to make sure we're on the same page here. When you react to that original pain, it makes it more painful, or as an experience, it's more painful than the original one. Now, for me, this is a really empowering piece of knowledge. Because what it means is that my experience of pain is in my hands. Right? I have so much control and choice within that experience of pain. We call it self-regulation in psychology. This is really important. Now, the question is, how do I do this kind of work within my psychological experience as well? Because, as I'm sure you understand, this isn't just referring to physiological pain. The same thing happens to you with your negative emotions. There's the primary wave of negative emotions, and then there's the secondary one. What do you do with those? How do you work with them? In positive psychology, we incorporate that within... that's the wrong time to show this, right? Too close to lunch. In positive psychology, we incorporate that into our understanding of happiness. Because in positive psychology, we divide between two kinds of happiness. The first is called hedonic happiness, and it's very basic and very simple. It's all about pleasure. Hedonic happiness is when I eat this chocolate cake and I get this wave of sugar, sweetness, joy that is running through me. Or that moment where I find the parking spot, or that moment where my boss tells me, hey, you've got a raise. And I get this little explosion of joy within me. Short-term pleasure, hedonic happiness, a wonderful dimension of our happiness, and yet just part of it. Because the other part, very important within our psychological experience, is called eudaimonic happiness. And with eudaimonic happiness, it's not a short-term process, it's a long-term process. In eudaimonic happiness, it's not about pleasure, it's about finding that meeting point between our deeply held meaning in life and our own personal self, and how can we apply that? How can we live our meaning in our everyday lives? And the interesting point here is that as part of hedonic happiness, we have no space for negative emotions, right? There's no place for negative emotions as part of our hedonic happiness. Hedonic happiness is all about positive emotions. It's all about feeling good. But eudaimonia is filled with negative emotions, filled with it. If I think about my personal journey, my personal professional journey, right? The challenges I went through, the pain, the confusion. There was so much confusion when I engaged with my work, and uncertainty, so much of it. If I would have said no to those experiences, I wouldn't have been standing here today. I wouldn't have been standing here today. In fact, some of the most meaningful insights I came up with, stuff I write about, stuff that I teach, came out of those difficult challenges as a result of me saying yes to them, embracing them, working with them, and then learning and growing. So that's a professional example. I'll share a personal one as well. Those are my kids. Just seeing them, something changes inside. Something is melting. At the bottom, this is Aria, our daughter. She's 3, and she's half holding, half choking to death her little brother. Sol, she would have liked to, I think. Sol is just a year old. And my kids, they offer me great joy. And at the same time, it's super, super challenging and difficult, right? Raising kids is part joy and part guerrilla warfare. That's how I that's how I experience it in my everyday life. I'm serious. I wish that would have been a joke, but I'm serious. You wanna get a child's attention very, very quickly? Just sit down and look comfortable. Within milliseconds, they're all over you. True. Can you raise your hand if you're a parent? Can you raise your hand? Wonderful, wonderful. Can you keep your hand in the air if parenthood for you is something very rewarding, something you enjoy very much, something that is meaningful? Wonderful. Can you keep your hand in the air if parenthood for you is also very difficult, very challenging, sometimes very confusing? Wonderful. Thank you very much, everyone. So we have about 100% for all of those questions, right? That's what I'm talking about here. That's what I'm talking about. And that's an authentic answer. Parenthood, as it is with pretty much any other experience in life, incorporates the beauty and the pain of being human. If you think you can kick away half of that so that you can live with the first half, it's not going to happen. More than that, it will have harmful consequences. Do you want to see what happens? Let me show you what happens. This is a research from a group of researchers. The paper has been published in the Journal of Happiness Studies, McMahon et al., about a year and a half ago. And the title of the paper is Some Implications of Believing That Happiness Involves the Absence of Pain. Again, some implications of believing that happiness involves the absence of pain. Let's see what happens. As part of the study, they're investigating this very, very interesting concept around negative hedonic beliefs. Negative hedonic beliefs is all about people who believe that happiness is a state that is characterized by a relative lack of negative emotions, right? So if you think, hey, happiness for me has nothing to do with negative emotions, right? I won't experience any negative emotions when I'm happy, then you have a high level of what we call negative hedonic beliefs. Now, what we know from studies, and this is just one study, we have replicated this, and positive psychology have shown a lot of data around this, is that when you take a large group of people and you divide them into those with high levels of negative hedonic beliefs and low levels of negative hedonic beliefs, both groups would deal with low levels of stress and anxiety in the same way, right? Both groups, my plane is delayed by 30 minutes, whatever, like low levels of anxiety and stress, both groups will deal with it very well. However, when things get really tough, when we deal with the high levels of stress and anxiety, we see a significant difference between those two groups. Those with high negative hedonic beliefs, in other words, those who believe that happiness do not incorporate in any way negative emotions, they will experience under high stress and anxiety more negative affect, more negative emotion, and more depressive symptoms compared to the other group who says, well, happiness incorporates at certain points negative emotions as well. Very, very interesting data. Because this kind of data is asking us questions about our beliefs to do with the nature of happiness. And what I want you to know is that those are not philosophical questions. Those are very practical questions. Because your beliefs about the nature of happiness and about how happiness works and how happiness influences us, that will have a significant impact on your actual level of happiness. More than that, as we can see here, it will have a significant impact on your level of resilience. If you believe that happiness has nothing to do with negative emotions, you will be less resilient when dealing with high levels of stress and anxiety. Very, very important for us to contemplate. Let me give you one practical example of how we can implement that. How can we work with that? Imagine you're in the middle of the desert. And you're on your own, and there's this beautiful house. This is where you live, and a storm is approaching, right? It's the storm within our consciousness. It's the storm of anger, or the storm of sadness, or the storm of uncertainty, and we can feel it's coming. And usually there are two popular ways for us to work with that storm. First, I run into it. You know what I'm talking about? I'm just like, whoop, heart and soul, into my anger, into my jealousy, into my frustration, and I'm lost in that storm. Second option, I see the storm coming, I run home, I close the door, I lock the door, I close the windows, I lock the windows, I close the curtains, I run under the table, open my hands above my head, and I pray for it to pass by, right? You know what I'm talking about? It's just go away, storm. I don't see you, I don't feel you, go away. Both of those options are examples of classic and yet unhealthy relationships with our negative emotions. Because with the first option, we have no self-awareness. We are lost there. we cannot observe, we cannot understand, we cannot derive important insights. In a second option, we have no space because we run away from it. We think we escape the negative emotion, and yet what happens in reality is that it builds up within us like layers of chocolate, and it gets heavier and heavier and heavier, and at some point, usually at the worst moment, it will explode and come out. So how do we deal with negative emotions? Imagine that the negative emotion is like a bonfire, and it's fire, and it's burning in front of you. And imagine that every time you escape into the storm, or every time you hide in your house, you add a piece of wood to the fire, and it grows. So the negative emotion grows. Every reaction towards the negative emotion will make it grow, will make the fire grow. Instead, can we just sit in front of the fire? Do we have the capacity to observe it, embrace it, breathe with it, without reacting to it? And I can imagine you've realized that I'm referring to the practice of mindfulness. This is just one example amongst many, many potential ways to do the kind of work within second wave positive psychology. But it's a path that I personally find highly rewarding and very powerful. It allows us to befriend our negative emotions, to build a healthy relationship with our negative emotions so that we don't get lost in them or hide away from them. We grow through them. If this feels meaningful to you in any way, I invite you to go to my website, which is awarenessisfreedom.com, where you can find my books and my journal articles and my online courses, and one of them is the online meditation and mindfulness teacher training, and there are many others, because what I'm trying to do is to invite people into this journey of working in a healthy way with our negative emotions so that we could grow. Because I wholeheartedly believe, I saw it about 1,000 times and I still smile. I wholeheartedly believe that in order for us to live life fully, we need to embrace the full spectrum of human emotions. Embracing the full spectrum of human emotions. And I'll end with the incredibly powerful words of Leonard Cohen from his song Anthem, who said, "Ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in." Thank you, everyone.